The Galactic Council's war chamber buzzed with the familiar hum of universal translators as delegates from 47 species gathered around the holographic display. The jungle world of Kepler 442b rotated slowly in the center, its emerald surface marked with red zones indicating Zephyrian occupation. Commander Vextar of the Reptilian Coalition slammed his scaled fist against the obsidian table, causing several smaller species to flinch. "Impossible," he hissed, his forked tongue flicking out in agitation. 3 divisions of our finest warriors vanished without a trace. The humans claim responsibility, but their forces number less than 50 soldiers. The avian delegate, high-perched Sarwing, ruffled her iridescent feathers dismissively. "Perhaps your forces simply got lost in the dense foliage, Vextar. My aerial scouts report no significant human military presence. Just scattered individuals moving through the canopy like lost hatchlings." A ripple of chittering laughter echoed from the insectoid section, where Ambassador Clickthac's compound eyes gleamed with amusement. The humans are known for their primitive approaches to warfare. Crude weapons, loud vehicles, and clumsy tactics. Their entertainment media celebrates such barbarism. Perhaps they simply frightened themselves and fled. Admiral Gornix of the Silicon Confederacy projected a holographic data stream into the chamber's central display. Analysis confirms minimal thermal signatures consistent with standard human metabolic output. No evidence of advanced weaponry or technological warfare. Logic suggests the Zephyrian forces encountered natural hazards or retreated due to incompetence. The discussion continued for several hours, each species contributing their theories about the mysterious disappearance of 3 full Zephyrian divisions, nearly 15,000 elite soldiers, on what should have been a routine planetary occupation. The jungle world held strategic importance due to its rare mineral deposits and position along key hyperlane routes, but its primitive ecosystem and lack of advanced indigenous life had made it seem like an easy conquest. None of the delegates paid particular attention to the small human representative sitting quietly in the corner. Captain Elena Vasquez wore the simple olive-green uniform of the Terran Defense Force, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She said nothing as the various alien species mocked human military capabilities, discussing their primitive weapons and outdated tactics with barely concealed contempt. What they didn't know was that Captain Vasquez had received a priority transmission just before the session began. The message was brief, consisting of only a few lines of text and a single video file. The text read, "Kepler, 442b situation resolved. Recommend immediate diplomatic solution. Package delivered as requested. Sergeant Marcus Chun, 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion." The attached video file was even more concise. 47 seconds of grainy footage showing a Zephyrian commander's head exploding in a spray of blue blood as he examined what appeared to be an empty clearing. The timestamp indicated it was recorded just 6 hours earlier, during what should have been the final assault on the human position. Captain Vasquez allowed herself a small smile as she listened to the increasingly animated discussions about human military inadequacy. She had grown up on a frontier colony where hunting was a way of life, where children learned to track, stalk, and kill before they learned to read. She understood something these advanced civilizations had forgotten in their millennia of technological warfare. Sometimes the most primitive methods were the most effective. The Zephyrian military doctrine relied heavily on overwhelming force and technological superiority. Their soldiers were genetically enhanced, their weapons powered by antimatter cells, and their armor could deflect energy blasts that could level city blocks. What they weren't prepared for was an enemy that didn't fight fair, didn't announce their presence, and turned the environment itself into a weapon. Sergeant Marcus Chun and his team of 49 volunteers had arrived on Kepler 442b 2 weeks before the Zephyrian invasion. They brought no powered armor, no energy weapons, no orbital support vessels. Instead, they carried modified hunting rifles, compound bows, and an extensive knowledge of guerrilla warfare tactics developed over centuries of human conflict. The jungle world's dense canopy and varied terrain provided perfect cover for their operations. Chin's team had spent the first week mapping patrol routes, identifying key choke points, and preparing what military historians would later call the most elaborate hunting ground in galactic history. The Zephyrians had landed expecting to face a conventional human military force. Their intelligence reports suggested minimal resistance from scattered survey teams and research stations. Instead, they found themselves entering a carefully orchestrated nightmare where every tree could hide death, every clearing could be a trap, and every step forward brought them deeper into an alien hunter's web. The first kills were surgical. Sentries posted at the perimeter of the landing zone simply vanished during shift changes. Their bodies were found days later, positioned in ways that sent clear messages to anyone with military training. The wounds were precise, single shots through the head or heart, delivered from impossible angles and extreme distances. Chen's team understood that psychological warfare was just as important as physical elimination. They didn't just kill Zephyrian soldiers, they terrorized them. Bodies appeared in places that should have been secure, arranged in patterns that suggested their killer had been watching for hours before striking. Equipment was sabotaged in ways that caused maximum disruption with minimal evidence. The jungle itself seemed to come alive against the invaders. Ancient human hunting techniques, refined over millions of years of evolution, proved devastatingly effective against species that had forgotten what it meant to be prey. Pitfall traps claimed entire squads, their spikes coated with toxins extracted from local flora. Tripwires triggered avalanches of debris that crushed armored vehicles like tin cans. But the psychological impact was the real weapon. The Zephyrians had conquered dozens of worlds through fear and intimidation. Now they found themselves afraid to sleep, afraid to patrol alone, afraid to venture beyond the increasingly shrinking perimeter of their base camp. Their advanced sensors could detect energy signatures and metal compositions, but they couldn't identify the human killers who moved through the jungle like ghosts. Commander Zekthar of the 2nd Zephyrian Legion had built his reputation on brutal efficiency. He had personally led the assault on 3 rebel worlds, crushing resistance through superior firepower and tactical precision. But Kepler 442b was different. His soldiers, genetically enhanced warriors who had never known fear, were beginning to crack under the psychological pressure. The breaking point came during the 3rd week of occupation. Zekthar had ordered a massive sweep operation, deploying all 3 divisions in a coordinated effort to flush out the human defenders. The plan was methodical: systematic grid searches, overlapping fields of fire, constant communication between units. Nothing could escape such a comprehensive net. That was when Sergeant Chun revealed the true extent of his preparation. The jungle had been transformed into a 3-dimensional battlefield, where every advantage lay with the hunters. Hidden observation posts provided real-time intelligence on Zephyrian movements. Camouflage supply caches ensured his team could operate indefinitely without resupply. Most importantly, the entire area had been mapped and prepared with an intricate network of killing fields. As the Zephyrian forces advanced through their predetermined search patterns, they walked directly into a series of interlocking ambushes. Chen's snipers, positioned in trees and concealed platforms, began picking off officers and communication specialists with surgical precision. The advanced Zephyrian armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, proved vulnerable to high-velocity projectiles fired from modified human rifles. The jungle's acoustics had been carefully studied and exploited. Gunshots echoed and reverberated in ways that made it impossible to determine their source. By the time Zephyrian forces could react to an attack, the human responsible had already relocated to a new position, leaving behind only confusion and mounting casualties. But Chen's masterstroke was his understanding of prey behavior. As the Zephyrian forces became increasingly disorganized and desperate, they began making the same mistakes that human hunters had exploited for millennia. They clustered together for security, making themselves better targets. They moved predictably along paths of least resistance. Most critically, they lost the ability to think tactically as fear and exhaustion clouded their judgment. The final phase began when Commander Zekthar himself decided to take personal command of a special operations team tasked with hunting down the human snipers. The Zephyrian commander was a veteran of dozens of campaigns, enhanced with cybernetic implants that increased his reaction time and tactical awareness. He represented the pinnacle of his species' military evolution. Chen had been waiting for exactly this moment. He had studied Zekthar's psychological profile, analyzed recordings of his previous campaigns, and identified the pride and arrogance that would eventually drive the commander to expose himself. The trap was prepared with meticulous care, designed to exploit every weakness in Zephyrian tactical doctrine. The killing ground was a natural clearing approximately 200 meters in diameter, surrounded by dense jungle growth. To Zephyrian sensors, it appeared empty, a perfect location to establish a forward observation post. What they couldn't detect were the carefully concealed firing positions that Chun and his team had spent weeks preparing. When Zekthar and his elite team entered the clearing, they found themselves in what human military tacticians call a fatal funnel, a confined space with limited escape routes where all the advantages belonged to the attackers. The Zephyrian commander had walked directly into the same type of trap that human hunters had used successfully against far more dangerous prey for millions of years. The engagement lasted exactly 47 seconds. Chen shot, a single bullet fired from a modified hunting rifle at a distance of nearly 800 meters, ended the Zephyrian occupation of Kepler, 442b, and sent shockwaves throughout the Galactic Council. Back in the war chamber, Captain Vasquez finally spoke as the various delegates continued their heated debate about the mysterious fate of the Zephyrian forces. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the universal translators, "perhaps we should discuss terms for the immediate withdrawal of all hostile forces from human-claimed territories." The chamber fell silent as every delegate turned to stare at the small human officer. Commander Vextar's scaled features twisted in what might have been amusement. "You dare make demands after your forces failed to prevent the elimination of our allies?" he hissed. "Your primitive hunters are clearly no match for trained military professionals." Captain Vasquez reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small data chip, which she inserted into the chamber's central display system. "I think you should see this before making any further tactical assessments." The holographic display filled with the image of Commander Zekthar's final moments. The recording showed the Zephyrian commander examining what appeared to be an empty jungle clearing, completely unaware that death was approaching from nearly half a mile away. The bullet's impact was catastrophic, and the video ended with the commander's body crumpling to the jungle floor. "This was recorded 6 hours ago," Vasquez announced calmly. "Sergeant Marcus Chun and his team of 49 volunteers have successfully eliminated 3 full divisions of Zephyrian forces using nothing more than primitive human hunting techniques. Commander Zekthar was the last confirmed kill." The silence in the chamber was absolute. The implications were staggering. A handful of humans armed with what these advanced species considered obsolete weapons had not only defeated but completely annihilated a force of 15,000 elite soldiers. Ambassador Clickthac's compound eyes focused and unfocused rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports indicated humans lack the capability for effective military operations against technologically superior forces." "Your intelligence was incorrect," Vasquez replied. "You made the classic mistake of assuming that technological advancement equals tactical superiority. Humans have been perfecting the art of hunting for millions of years. We understand patience, stealth, and the psychological aspects of warfare in ways that your species have forgotten." High-perched Sarwing's feathers had gone completely flat against her body, indicating fear. "But the numbers 49 humans against 15,000 trained warriors. Numbers are irrelevant when you control the environment," Vasquez explained. Sergeant Chun and his team turned an entire jungle into a hunting ground. Every tree, every clearing, every path became part of their weapon system. The Zephyrians weren't fighting humans. They were fighting the planet itself, guided by human intelligence and human patience. Admiral Gornix's silicon-based form flickered as he processed this new information. The tactical implications are disturbing. If human forces can achieve such results against numerically superior opponents, our current military doctrines may require complete revision. Captain Vasquez allowed herself another small smile. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd realize. Now, shall we discuss the immediate and complete withdrawal of all hostile forces from human space, Or would you prefer to test the effectiveness of human hunting techniques on your own homeworlds? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Every delegate in the chamber understood that they were no longer dealing with what they had assumed was a primitive, technologically inferior species. They were facing a species that had evolved as apex predators and had never truly stopped hunting. The vote for immediate withdrawal was unanimous. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's emergency withdrawal from human territories, but the reverberations of what happened on Kepler 442b continued to shake the foundations of galactic civilization. In the deep archives of the Xerian Intelligence Consortium, senior analyst Corvex hunched over his workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing combat footage, tactical analyses, and psychological profiles. The Xerions prided themselves on being the galaxy's premier information brokers, selling military intelligence and strategic assessments to the highest bidders. Their crystalline forms could process vast amounts of data simultaneously, making them invaluable for complex military planning. But the human situation had them completely baffled. "Show me the Chun analysis again," Corvex commanded, his crystalline structure resonating with frustration. The main display filled with everything they had managed to piece together about Sergeant Marcus Chun. Born on the frontier colony of New Montana, Chun had grown up hunting the local megafauna, predators that could crush a human in their jaws without effort. His military record showed deployments in 3 separate conflict zones, each time volunteering for the most dangerous reconnaissance missions. What troubled the Xerian analysts wasn't Chin's background. Many species had individuals with similar combat experience. What made no sense was how he had coordinated such a devastating campaign with such minimal resources and communication. Analysis indicates the human team maintained radio silence throughout the entire operation, Corvex noted aloud. No encrypted communications, no quantum entanglement networks, no telepathic coordination. Yet their actions showed perfect tactical synchronization. His assistant, a younger Xerian named Talvex, flickered with uncertainty. Perhaps they used some form of primitive chemical marking system? Several lower-tier species employ pheromone communication for basic coordination. Negative, Corvex replied, pulling up spectroscopic analyses of the battlefield. No chemical signatures beyond normal human metabolic byproducts and local flora. They coordinated a complex multi-phase operation involving precise timing and positioning using nothing more than what do humans call it, fieldcraft. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council's military doctrine relied heavily on sophisticated communication networks, real-time data sharing, and centralized command structures. The idea that a combat team could operate effectively without any of these advantages challenged everything they understood about modern warfare. "Pull up the tactical recreation," Corvex ordered. The holographic display transformed into a 3-dimensional map of the Kepler 442b jungle. Red dots indicated confirmed Zephyrian positions, while blue dots showed estimated human locations based on ballistic analysis and forensic evidence. Green lines traced probable movement patterns, creating a complex web that revealed the true scope of Chen's operation. "Look at this pattern," Corvex highlighted a series of ambush sites. Each engagement was positioned to drive surviving Zephyrians toward predetermined kill zones. The humans weren't just hunting randomly. They were herding their prey like livestock. The recreation showed how Chen's team had used the jungle's natural features to channel enemy movement. Blocked paths forced Zephyrian patrols toward areas where snipers waited. Sabotaged equipment drove repair crews into carefully prepared ambushes. Even the psychological warfare was precisely calculated to create specific behavioral responses. The human commander understood Zephyrian psychology better than our own military analysts, Talvex observed, highlighting several incidents where Zephyrian forces had reacted exactly as the human tactics required. This was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire operation. Chen hadn't simply outfought a technologically superior enemy. He had outthought them. Somehow, a human soldier from Frontier Colony had developed more accurate psychological profiles of alien species than institutions that had studied them for centuries. The door to the analysis chamber dilated as Director Kexvar entered, his massive crystalline form casting rainbow patterns across the displays. As head of the Xerian Intelligence Consortium, Kexvar had access to classified information from dozens of galactic governments. His presence indicated the highest level of concern. "What's the current assessment?" he asked without preamble. Korvex gestured to the tactical display. "The humans have fundamentally altered the strategic balance of galactic power. Their demonstration on Kepler 442b wasn't just a military victory. It was a proof of concept for an entirely different approach to warfare." Explain. Every major galactic power relies on technological superiority and numerical advantage. Our military doctrines assume that advanced sensors, energy weapons, and powered armor provide decisive advantages in combat. The humans proved that assumption false. Kexvar's form shifted to a darker hue, indicating deep concern. "You're suggesting that human tactics could be replicated by other species?" "Worse than that," Talvex interjected. "We're suggesting that humans have capabilities that we don't fully understand." The Chin operation required skills that aren't taught in military academies: patience, stealth, environmental awareness, and an intuitive understanding of prey behavior that appears to be hardwired into human psychology. The director accessed the main database directly, his consciousness interfacing with the consortium's vast information networks. Millions of data points flowed through his crystalline structure as he reviewed everything they had collected about human military capabilities. "Show me the extended analysis," he commanded. The displays shifted to show broader patterns of human conflict throughout their recorded history. Unlike most species, which had developed warfare as a technological endeavor, humans had evolved it as a biological function. Their entire approach to combat was based on predator instincts refined over millions of years of evolution. "Look at this pattern analysis." Korvex highlighted specific data streams. Humans are the only known species that developed projectile weapons before energy-based technologies. They're also the only species that continued to refine primitive hunting techniques even after achieving spaceflight capability. This suggests an evolutionary pathway completely different from every other sapient species we've encountered, Talvex added. Most civilizations abandon primitive survival skills as they develop advanced technology. Humans retained and refined them. The implications were becoming clear. While other species had spent millennia perfecting technological warfare, humans had spent the same time perfecting biological warfare. They understood concepts like camouflage, stealth, and ambush tactics not as learned skills, but as evolutionary adaptations. "Pull up the psychological profiles," Director Kexvar ordered. The display filled with comparative analyses of different species' responses to combat stress. Zephyrians showed increased aggression and reduced tactical awareness when threatened. Avians tended to cluster together and seek elevated positions. Insectoids relied on pheromone communication and struggled when isolated. Humans showed a completely different pattern. Combat stress actually improved their hunting instincts, sharpening their awareness and increasing their patience. They became more dangerous when isolated, not less. Most importantly, they seem to instinctively understand the psychological weaknesses of other species. This Chun individual exploited every documented weakness in Zephyrian combat psychology, Korvex noted. Isolation tactics to break their unit cohesion, patience-based warfare to exploit their aggression responses, and environmental manipulation to trigger their prey instincts. "Are you suggesting that humans studied our psychological profiles?" Kexvar asked. "No, Talvex replied grimly. We're suggesting they didn't need to. They recognized other species as prey animals and instinctively knew how to hunt them." The chamber fell silent as the full implications sank in. The Galactic Council had made a fundamental error in their assessment of human capabilities. They had assumed that humans were another technological species seeking to compete in an arms race of increasingly sophisticated weapons and tactics. Instead, humans were apex predators who had never stopped hunting. They had simply learned to hunt new types of prey. "There's something else," Korvex added reluctantly. "We've been analyzing human entertainment media to better understand their psychology. Their fiction consistently portrays scenarios where technologically inferior humans defeat superior alien forces through superior tactics and determination." "So, they've been planning for this type of conflict?" Kexvar asked. "Not planning, fantasizing. Humans have been imagining scenarios where they hunt alien species for entertainment purposes. The Chin operation wasn't an improvised response to a crisis. It was the implementation of tactical concepts that humans have been developing for decades in their recreational media. The director's form flickered through several color spectrums as he processed this information. Are you telling me that human entertainment prepared them for galactic warfare? We're telling you that human entertainment is galactic warfare preparation, Talvex corrected. They've been practicing these scenarios psychologically for generations. Director Kexvar accessed the intelligence networks again, this time focusing on human colonial activities. What he found confirmed their worst fears. Human colonies consistently chose worlds with dangerous indigenous life forms. They deliberately placed themselves in environments where they would be forced to maintain their hunting skills. They've been preparing for this for centuries, he realized aloud. Every frontier colony, every dangerous world they've settled, it's all been training for eventual conflict with technologically superior species. The analysis chamber's displays filled with strategic assessments from dozens of galactic powers. Every major civilization was frantically re-evaluating their military doctrines in light of the Kepler 442b demonstration. Defense spending had increased by an average of 40% across all Council member species, with most of the increases going toward anti-sniper technologies and stealth detection systems. The market response has been immediate, Corvex noted, displaying economic data. Orders for personal armor have increased by 300%. Advanced sensor systems are backordered for the next 2 years. Everyone is trying to adapt to human hunting tactics. But they're missing the point, Talvex observed. You can't adapt to something that's based on evolutionary advantages. Humans don't just use stealth tactics. They think in ways that make them naturally stealthy. They don't just practice patience. Their psychology is structured around it. Director Kexvar reviewed the tactical analyses one more time, his crystalline form growing progressively darker as he absorbed the implications. The Chin operation had demonstrated that humans possess capabilities that couldn't be copied, purchased, or reverse engineered. They had evolutionary advantages that gave them inherent superiority in certain types of combat. What's our recommendation to clients? He asked. Corvex and Talvex exchanged what would have been nervous glances if they had possessed faces. Complete avoidance of military engagement with human forces, Corvex replied. In any scenario where humans can control the environment and choose the terms of engagement, technological superiority becomes irrelevant. What about overwhelming numerical advantage? Kexvar pressed. The Zephyrians had overwhelming numerical advantage, Talvex pointed out. 300 to 1 odds, and they still lost every engagement. Numerical superiority only matters if you can bring those numbers to bear effectively. Human tactics seem specifically designed to negate numerical advantages. The director reviewed the psychological profiles one final time, focusing on the human ability to remain motionless for extended periods while maintaining perfect awareness of their surroundings. Most galactic species found extended inactivity physically uncomfortable and mentally distressing. Humans seem to find it relaxing. There's one more factor we haven't discussed, he said slowly. The Chin operation was conducted by frontier colonists, humans who specifically chose to live on dangerous worlds. But Earth itself has a population of 12 billion humans, most of whom grew up in urban environments. Are we certain that all humans possess these capabilities? Corvex pulled up additional data from human educational systems. Preliminary analysis suggests that human children are taught basic hunting and survival skills as part of standard education. Even urban humans participate in what they call recreational hunting during their leisure time. The capabilities appear to be maintained across their entire population. Furthermore, Talvex added, human military recruitment focuses specifically on individuals with hunting backgrounds. Their most elite units are composed entirely of individuals who demonstrated superior hunting skills before military service. The implications were clear. The Galactic Council hadn't faced a small group of specially trained human soldiers on Kepler 442b. They had faced a representative sample of human military capabilities. Somewhere in human space, there were thousands of soldiers with similar or superior skills, all trained in the same evolutionary hunting traditions that had produced Sergeant Shun. Director Kexvar made his decision. Issue a Priority Alpha Intelligence Update to all clients. New classification for human military capabilities. Apex Predator status. Recommend against any military engagement unless victory can be achieved through orbital bombardment without ground force deployment. What about the commercial implications? Corvex asked. Immediate market advisory. Invest heavily in human goods and services. If they're this effective as enemies, they'll be invaluable as allies. The director paused, his crystalline form cycling through complex color patterns, and begin discreet negotiations for a non-aggression pact with the Terran Defense Force. Whatever they want, give it to them. As the Xerian analysts began implementing their director's orders, none of them noticed the small communications pulse that had been monitoring their conversation. Deep in human space, intelligence officers were already analyzing the alien response to their demonstration of capabilities. The hunt was far from over, it was just beginning. The neutral trading station of Nexus Prime orbited the binary star system of Keth Vorel, serving as a hub for diplomatic and commercial activities between dozens of galactic civilizations. Its massive rotating wheels housed embassies, markets, and meeting spaces designed to accommodate the varied atmospheric and gravitational requirements of member species. Today, it hosted the most significant diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Ambassador Sarah Chun, no relation to Sergeant Marcus Chun, though the shared surname was causing considerable anxiety among alien delegates, sat at the circular negotiation table reviewing her briefing materials. The 60-year-old career diplomat had spent 30 years managing human relations with various galactic powers, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for the current situation. Across from her, representatives of the major galactic powers maintained careful distances from each other and even more careful distances from her. The Zephyrian delegation sat behind portable force fields, their scaled features twitching nervously whenever Ambassador Chun made sudden movements. The insectoid Kithira had positioned themselves near the ceiling vents, ready to flee at the first sign of trouble. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings of various classifications, Ambassador Chun began, activating the universal translators. I understand there have been some concerns about recent events in human space. The reaction was immediate. High Command's elixir of the Draconian Empire, a massive reptilian being whose species had conquered half the galactic rim, actually flinched at her words. Concerns? He roared, though his voice carried undertones of fear. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that threaten the fundamental balance of galactic civilization. I think there may be some misunderstanding about what happened on Kepler 442b, Chen replied calmly, though internally she was struggling to maintain diplomatic composure. Her briefings had outlined the tactical details of Marcus Chen's operation, but the psychological impact on alien species was beyond anything her xenopsychology advisors had predicted. Negotiator Vithran of the Silicon Confederacy projected a holographic display showing statistical analyses. The mathematics are clear, Ambassador Chun. 50 human soldiers eliminated 15,000 Zephyrian troops with 0 casualties. This represents a combat efficiency ratio that exceeds theoretical maximums for any known military force. Perhaps, Chen suggested carefully, we should focus on preventing similar incidents rather than analyzing those that have already occurred. The suggestion triggered what could only be described as panic among several delegations. The crystalline Xerian representative began flickering rapidly through color spectrums, while the ethereal void-touched delegates started phasing in and out of visible reality. Prevention implies the possibility of repetition, observed Chancellor Mordek of the Academic Coalition, his multiple tentacles writhing in agitation. Are you suggesting that human forces could replicate the Kepler 442b results on other worlds? Ambassador Chen realized she had walked into a diplomatic minefield. The truth was that Marcus Chen's operation had been relatively small-scale compared to what human military doctrine considered possible. The Terran Defense Force had thousands of soldiers with similar capabilities, and their strategic planning included scenarios for much larger conflicts. What I'm suggesting, she said carefully, is that we work together to establish clear boundaries and mutual understanding that will prevent any misunderstandings that might lead to unfortunate incidents. The euphemistic language fooled no one. Every alien delegate understood that Chun was politely threatening to unleash human hunters on any species that chose to continue hostilities. Fleet Marshal Kextara of the Avian Republics ruffled her feathers in distress. Our analysis indicates that human military tactics are specifically designed to exploit the psychological weaknesses of non-human species. This suggests premeditation and planning that spans decades or possibly centuries. Humans are naturally adaptable, Chen replied, which was both true and completely misleading. She couldn't exactly explain that human entertainment media had been preparing for alien warfare scenarios since before they had achieved spaceflight. The real truth was even more disturbing than the aliens suspected. The Terran Defense Force had been quietly studying alien psychology and developing specialized tactics for potential conflicts since first contact with galactic civilization. Marcus Chen's operation wasn't a desperate improvisation. It was a field test of doctrinally approved hunting techniques. Adaptable, repeated Hive Speaker Zeklar of the collective consciousness, his compound eyes focusing and unfocusing rapidly. Our species has observed human behavior for 17 years since first contact. Human adaptability appears to be specifically oriented toward predatory applications. That seems like an unnecessarily hostile interpretation, Chun said, though she knew the aliens were absolutely correct. Humans had indeed adapted to galactic civilization primarily by learning how to hunt its various species. Trade Prince Vor Allen of the Mercantile Federation leaned forward nervously. Ambassador Chun, our economic analysts have been reviewing human colonial expansion patterns. Every human settlement is positioned on worlds with dangerous indigenous life forms. This suggests your species deliberately seeks out environments that require predatory skills. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Human colonial policy did indeed prioritize worlds where settlers would be forced to maintain their hunting capabilities. The official reason was character building, but the unofficial reason was military preparedness. Human pioneers prefer challenges, Chen replied diplomatically. Challenges that involve killing things, muttered War Chief Grandar of the barbarian clans, one of the few species present that actually respected human military capabilities. My people understand this. We too are hunters. But even we do not hunt with such efficiency. This comment drew alarmed looks from the other delegates. The barbarian clans were among the most militaristic species in galactic civilization, known for their aggressive expansion and warrior culture. If they were impressed by human hunting skills, the implications were terrifying. Perhaps we could discuss specific terms for mutual non-aggression, Chen suggested, hoping to steer the conversation toward productive outcomes. Non-aggression assumes the possibility of aggression, Chancellor Mordek pointed out. Are you implying that human forces could expand their operations beyond defensive scenarios? Again, Chen found herself trapped by the logical implications of diplomatic language. The honest answer was yes. Human military doctrine included extensive provisions for offensive operations against technologically superior enemies. But admitting this would likely trigger a preemptive strike by the entire Galactic Council. Humans prefer peaceful coexistence, she said instead, which was technically true if you defined peaceful coexistence as everyone leaves us alone and we don't have to hunt them. Negotiator Vithran projected new data streams. Our analysis suggests that human preferences are irrelevant. The Kepler 442b operation demonstrates capabilities that could destabilize galactic civilization regardless of human intentions. The Silicon Confederacy representative had identified the core problem. Even if humans had no aggressive intentions, their mere existence as apex predators created psychological pressure that was disrupting the established order of galactic society. What exactly are you proposing? Chen asked. Containment, High Command's elixir said bluntly. Human space could be designated as a restricted zone. No non-human ships allowed beyond current borders. No human expansion into new systems. The suggestion was outrageous, but Chen could see several other delegates nodding in agreement. They were so terrified of human military capabilities that they were willing to implement what amounted to species-wide imprisonment. That seems rather extreme, Chen observed. Extreme situations require extreme measures, Fleet Marshal Kextara replied. Our military advisors calculate that unrestricted human expansion could result in the eventual subjugation of all galactic civilizations. Through hunting? Chen asked, genuinely confused. Through fear, Chancellor Mordeck explained. The psychological impact of the Kepler 442b demonstration has already destabilized 7 governments. 3 species have enacted emergency military conscription. The Zephyrian Republic is considering abandoning their outer colonies entirely. Chen was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. The aliens weren't just afraid of human military capabilities, they were afraid of their own fear. The knowledge the humans could hunt them had triggered psychological responses that were tearing apart galactic civilization from within. What if we offered guarantees, she suggested. Formal agreements that human forces would only be deployed in defensive scenarios? How could such guarantees be verified? Hive speaker Zeklar asked. Human military capabilities appear to be based on evolutionary advantages that cannot be detected or monitored by external observation. This was another accurate and uncomfortable observation. Human hunting skills were indeed impossible to monitor because they were psychological rather than technological. A human soldier could walk through any security checkpoint looking like a harmless civilian while carrying all the capabilities demonstrated by Marcus Chen's team. You're suggesting that humans are inherently untrustworthy? Chen asked. We're suggesting that humans are inherently dangerous, War Chief Grandar replied. This is not necessarily a bad thing. My people respect dangerous opponents. But the others, he gestured dismissively at the various alien delegates. They fear what they cannot control. Trade Prince Voralin began projecting economic data. The commercial implications are becoming severe. Shipping insurance rates for routes near human space have increased by 400%. Several trade routes have been abandoned entirely. The galactic economy is beginning to contract due to fear of human expansion. The situation was spiraling beyond military concerns into economic warfare. The mere possibility that humans might expand their territory was creating market instability that threatened to collapse interstellar trade. What would it take to restore confidence in galactic stability? Chen asked. Proof that human military capabilities are limited to defensive applications. Negotiator Vithran replied immediately. Demonstration that human forces cannot or will not engage in offensive operations. And how would you suggest we provide such proof? Military inspection of human facilities, High Command Zelixer suggested. Verification that human forces are not being trained for offensive operations. Chen almost laughed at the suggestion. Human military training was entirely focused on hunting techniques that could be applied offensively or defensively, depending on circumstances. There was no meaningful distinction between the two in human military doctrine. That might be difficult to arrange, she said diplomatically. Difficult or impossible? Chancellor Mordeck pressed. Impossible, she admitted. Human military training is based on capabilities that are inherently dual use. We can't demonstrate peaceful intentions through military inspection because our defensive capabilities are identical to our offensive capabilities. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this admission sank in. Every delegate understood that Chen had just confirmed their worst fears. Humans could not be meaningfully constrained because their military advantages were psychological rather than technological. Fleet Marshal Kextera broke the silence. Then, we are facing an evolutionary arms race where one species possesses advantages that cannot be countered through technological development. Unless, War Chief Grandar suggested with what might have been enthusiasm, other species learn to hunt as humans do. The horrified reactions from the other delegates made it clear that this was not considered a viable option. Most galactic civilizations had evolved beyond predatory behavior millions of years ago and had no desire to revert to it. There might be another solution, Chun said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. What if we offered military assistance rather than military restraint? Explain, demanded High Command's elixir. Human hunting capabilities could be employed defensively on behalf of galactic civilization. When threats arise that conventional military forces cannot handle, human specialists could provide assistance. The suggestion caused immediate debate among the alien delegates. Several species began rapid consultation through their respective communication networks. You're proposing to become the galaxy's hunters for hire? Trade Prince Voralin asked. I'm proposing to become the galaxy's protectors, Chen corrected. Human capabilities could be employed to maintain galactic stability rather than threaten it. The debate continued for several hours as delegates consulted with their home governments. When they reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted from fear to cautious curiosity. The Terran Defense Force would be willing to accept contracts for services that conventional forces cannot provide. Negotiator Vithran asked. Under appropriate circumstances and with proper oversight, Chun confirmed. What kind of oversight? Chancellor Murdik inquired suspiciously. Ambassador Chun smiled, finally, seeing a path forward that didn't involve species-wide containment. The kind that ensures everyone understands exactly what human hunters are capable of and why it's better to have them as allies than enemies. The negotiations would continue for weeks, but the fundamental framework was established. Humans would not be contained, they would be employed. The galaxy's apex predators would become its ultimate guardians, and everyone would sleep a little less soundly knowing that human hunters were watching from the shadows. 6 months after the diplomatic negotiations on Nexus Prime, the first joint military operation between human forces and the Galactic Council was about to commence on the mining world of Zirion 7. The planet's crystalline caverns held strategic mineral deposits essential to interstellar technology, but they also harbored something that had driven 3 separate galactic expeditions to madness and death. Colonel Maria Santos of the Terran Defense Force stood at the edge of the crystalline forest that covered Zirion 7's primary continent, studying the alien formations through her tactical scope. Each tree was a massive crystal spire reaching hundreds of meters into the purple sky, their faceted surfaces refracting the binary sun's light into dazzling rainbow patterns. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, and, according to every previous expedition report, absolutely lethal. Contact status report, Colonel, came the voice of Admiral Thekvar through her communications array. The Zirion commander was stationed aboard the orbital command vessel, safely distant from whatever had destroyed his species' previous mining operations. No visual contact with hostiles, Santos replied, proceeding with reconnaissance phase as planned. Behind her, a squad of 20 human soldiers prepared their equipment with methodical precision. Unlike the standard galactic forces that had attempted this mission before, they carried no energy weapons, no powered armor, no technological solutions to an unknown threat. Instead, they bore the tools of human hunters, modified rifles, compound bows, motion sensors, and, most importantly, the evolved instincts of apex predators. Colonel, called Sergeant First Class David Kim, the team's senior tracker. Motion analysis indicates something large moving through the crystal formations approximately 2 clicks northeast. Pattern suggests coordinated movement, not random wildlife behavior. Santos nodded, studying the tactical display on her wrist unit. The previous galactic expeditions had detected similar movement patterns before losing contact entirely. The difference was that those expeditions had tried to engage with conventional military tactics. Santos intended to approach this as a hunting problem, not a military one. Team Alpha, establish overwatch positions on the perimeter crystals, she ordered. Team Beta, advance reconnaissance with full stealth protocols. Team Gamma, prepare the containment zone. Remember, we don't know what we're hunting yet, so we adapt to whatever we find. The human soldiers dispersed into the crystal forest with the fluid efficiency of pack hunters. They moved without sound, used hand signals for communication, and positioned themselves to maximize observation while minimizing detection. Within minutes, they had effectively disappeared into the alien landscape. This was what made human military tactics so disturbing to other species. The ability to become invisible in any environment using nothing more than natural camouflage and predatory instincts. Aboard the orbital command vessel, Admiral Thekvar monitored the human team's progress with growing unease. His crystalline sensors could detect the presence of the soldiers, but their heat signatures were so minimal and their movement patterns so irregular that they barely registered as sapient life forms. Human thermal output has decreased by 60%, his tactical officer reported. Movement patterns suggest they are actively avoiding detection by unknown means. How is that possible? Thekvar asked. Biological entities cannot willfully alter their metabolic output. Apparently, human biological entities can, the officer replied nervously. Furthermore, their movement patterns are inconsistent with standard military doctrine. They appear to be mimicking local wildlife behavior. This observation was accurate. Santos and her team had spent weeks studying recordings of Zirian-7's indigenous crystal formations and the rare life forms that inhabited them. They had learned to move like the crystalline entities that lived within the forest, adopting gait patterns and positioning that would blend seamlessly with native species. Colonel Santos, Admiral Thekvar, transmitted, "Our sensors indicate your team has dispersed beyond standard communication range. Please maintain unit cohesion." "Negative, Admiral," Santos replied quietly. "Standard unit cohesion makes us visible to whatever's hunting in this forest. We're operating on extended reconnaissance protocols." What Santos didn't explain was that extended reconnaissance protocols was human military terminology for "we're now hunting something, and we need to think like predators rather than soldiers." The first contact came 30 minutes later. Sergeant Kim, positioned in an elevated crystal formation, spotted movement that didn't match any known patterns of local wildlife. Through his scope, he observed shapes moving through the crystal forest, shapes that seemed to phase in and out of visibility as they passed behind the refracting crystal surfaces. "Contact," he whispered into his throat microphone. Multiple entities, approximately humanoid, but with apparent optical camouflage capabilities. Distance 400 meters, moving in coordinated search pattern. Santos received the report and immediately began calculating tactical responses. The previous galactic expeditions had been eliminated by entities that could apparently become invisible and moved with coordinated intelligence. This suggested either advanced technology or evolutionary camouflage abilities. "Observation priority," she ordered. "Do not engage. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we commit to action." This was classic human hunting doctrine: patience, observation, and understanding of prey behavior before committing to an attack. It was also completely contrary to standard galactic military practice, which emphasized immediate engagement and overwhelming firepower. Over the next 2 hours, Santos's team observed and cataloged the entity's behavior patterns. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The creatures, whatever they were, displayed intelligence, coordination, and hunting behaviors that mirrored apex predators. They moved in pack formations, established perimeter security, and, most disturbingly, they seemed to be actively searching for the human team. "Colonel," reported Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez from her concealed position, "I've got visual confirmation on one of the entities. It's not using technological camouflage. It's some kind of biological light refraction. The creature can bend light around itself to become effectively invisible." This was the breakthrough Santos needed. If the entities used biological camouflage, they would have specific limitations and vulnerabilities that could be exploited. She began formulating a hunting strategy based on the assumption that these creatures were evolved predators rather than technologically advanced enemies. "All teams, switch to infrared targeting," she ordered. Biological camouflage affects visible light spectrum, but shouldn't completely mask thermal signatures. "Thermal imaging shows multiple heat sources," Kim reported. "But the signatures are inconsistent. They appear to be cycling between hot and cold states." "Adaptive thermoregulation," Santos realized. These things can control their body temperature to avoid thermal detection. The implications were staggering. The entities hunting on Zirian-7 possessed evolutionary advantages that made them nearly undetectable to conventional sensors. They could become invisible to visual observation and mask their thermal signatures. No wonder 3 galactic expeditions had been eliminated without managing to identify their attackers. But Santos and her team had advantages of their own. As human hunters, they understood that the most sophisticated camouflage could be defeated by patience, observation, and an understanding of predator psychology. "New tactical assessment," she transmitted to her team. "We're dealing with evolved apex predators that have adapted to hunt technologically advanced species. They're using our own sensor limitations against us." "What do we counter that?" Rodriguez asked. "We stop relying on sensors and start hunting like humans," Santos replied. "Switch to visual tracking, environmental awareness, and behavioral prediction. These things might be invisible to our equipment, but they can't hide their impact on the environment." The human team began employing tracking techniques that predated technology by millions of years. They looked for disturbed vegetation, changes in local wildlife behavior, and subtle environmental indicators that revealed the presence of the camouflaged entities. Within an hour, they had developed a comprehensive understanding of their opponent's movement patterns. "I've got predictive tracks on 3 entities," Kim reported. "They're moving in a closing pattern that suggests they've detected our presence and are attempting to surround us." "Confirmed," Santos replied. "They're hunting us just like we're hunting them." This was the moment Santos had been waiting for. The entities had revealed their tactical doctrine by attempting to encircle the human team. Now, she could predict their behavior and turn their own hunting instincts against them. "All teams, implement counter-encirclement protocol," she ordered. "Let them think they're surrounding us, then spring the trap." The next phase of the operation demonstrated why human tactical doctrine was so effective against technologically superior opponents. Instead of fighting the entity's encirclement attempt, Santos's team allowed it to proceed while secretly repositioning to create their own larger encirclement. When the entities moved to spring their trap, they found themselves surrounded by human hunters who had been patiently waiting for exactly this moment. The engagement was brief and decisive. The entity's biological camouflage was useless once the humans had predicted their positions. Their adaptive thermoregulation couldn't protect them from attacks they couldn't see coming. Most importantly, their pack hunting tactics, evolved to defeat technologically dependent prey, were countered by human pack hunting tactics evolved to defeat apex predators. "All entities neutralized," Santos reported. "Beginning specimen collection for analysis." "Impossible," Admiral Dekvar responded. "Our sensors show no evidence of combat engagement." "That's because we didn't engage in combat," Santos explained. "We engaged in hunting. There's a difference." The distinction was lost on the Xerian commander, but it was fundamental to understanding human military superiority. Other species fought wars. Humans conducted hunts. The psychological and tactical implications were completely different. As Santos's team secured the area and began collecting specimens of the defeated entities, she reflected on the broader implications of this operation. The Galactic Council had hired human hunters to solve problems that conventional military forces couldn't handle. But what they hadn't realized was that every successful hunt taught humans more about how to defeat technologically advanced species. "Colonel," Kim called out, "you need to see this." Santos approached the specimens her team had collected. Up close, the entities were even more impressive than she had expected. They were clearly evolved predators with biological systems adapted specifically for hunting technologically dependent species. Their camouflage organs, adaptive thermoregulation, and pack coordination represented millions of years of evolutionary refinement. These things evolved specifically to hunt galactic civilization, Rodriguez observed. They're perfectly adapted to defeat energy weapons, sensor systems, and standard military tactics. But not human tactics, Santos noted grimly. Because human tactics evolved to hunt things that hunt us. The implications sent a chill down her spine. Humanity had stumbled into a galactic civilization where they were uniquely qualified to defeat threats that no one else could handle. They weren't just apex predators. They were the apex predators of apex predators. Colonel Santos, Admiral Thekvar, transmitted, "Please provide tactical assessment for command evaluation." Santos looked at the defeated entities, then at her team of human hunters who had accomplished in 4 hours what 3 galactic expeditions had failed to achieve over 6 months. "Assessment complete, Admiral," she replied. "Mission successful. Xerion, 7 is secure for mining operations." What she didn't report was her growing realization that humanity had found its role in galactic civilization. They weren't joining as equals. They were assuming their natural position at the top of the food chain. "Preparing to return to base," she announced to her team. "Outstanding work, everyone." As the human hunters prepared to leave the crystal forest, none of them noticed the small recording devices that had been monitoring their operation. Deep in the archives of a dozen galactic intelligence services, analysts were studying every moment of the engagement, trying to understand how humans had accomplished the impossible. What they discovered would keep them awake for months. Humanity hadn't just defeated an unknown threat. They had done it using methods that no other species could replicate. The hunt was becoming a science, and humans were the only species in the galaxy that had evolved to practice it. The galaxy was beginning to understand that they hadn't hired human mercenaries to solve their problems. They had awakened sleeping apex predators and shown them new types of prey to hunt. The consequences would reshape galactic civilization forever. 2 years had passed since the first joint operations between human forces and the Galactic Council, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one had anticipated. The Terran Defense Force had successfully resolved 17 impossible situations that had stymied conventional military forces, earning both respect and a growing sense of unease among the galactic powers. General Amanda Foster stood in the observation deck of the new Joint Operations Facility orbiting Earth, reviewing reports from across known space. The massive station served as headquarters for what the Galactic Council had officially designated the Special Threat Response Division. Though everyone involved understood, it was simply an organization designed to unleash human hunters when conventional forces failed. General, called Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Chun as he entered the command center. The veteran of the Kepler 442b operation had been promoted to head tactical planning for the new division, bringing his expertise in what military historians were already calling evolutionary warfare. Status report, Colonel. Foster requested, though she could tell from Chin's expression that the news wasn't entirely positive. We have 3 new requests for assistance, Chin replied, activating the holographic display. The crystalline hierarchy is dealing with some kind of quantum phase predator that's been eliminating their research stations. The avian republics have lost contact with an entire colony world after their surveys detected massive predatory life forms. And the Silicon Confederacy is requesting immediate intervention for what they're calling an unprecedented evolutionary threat. Foster studied the mission parameters with growing concern. Each request represented the kind of challenge that only human forces could address, but the frequency of such incidents was increasing exponentially. More troubling was the fact that many of these threats seemed to be specifically adapted to defeat technologically advanced species. "What's your tactical assessment?" she asked. Chen highlighted patterns in the data streams. "We're not just responding to random crises anymore, General. These threats are appearing with increasing frequency and sophistication. Either the galaxy is experiencing an unprecedented emergence of apex predators, or something is deliberately creating challenges that only humans can solve." The implications of the second possibility were disturbing. If some unknown force was engineering situations that required human intervention, it suggested a level of strategic planning that went far beyond anything the Galactic Council had encountered before. "Pull up the psychological impact assessments," Foster ordered. The display shifted to show data collected by xenopsychologists studying the galactic response to human military operations. What they found was a fundamental shift in how alien civilizations viewed their place in the cosmic hierarchy. "Fear-based compliance is increasing across all sectors," Chun reported. "Species that have never had direct contact with human forces are modifying their behavior based on reports of our operations. The Hierarchical Archive has documented 17 major governmental changes attributed directly to what they're calling human intimidation factor." Foster reviewed the specific data points with growing unease. The Zephyrian Republic had abandoned their entire expansion program and redirected their military toward defensive positions. The Mercantile Federation had restructured their trade agreements to ensure human colonies received preferential treatment. Most tellingly, 3 separate species had requested formal protectorate status under human administration. "They're not just hiring us as mercenaries," she realized aloud. "They're beginning to submit to us as a dominant species." "It gets worse," Chen continued. "Intelligence reports indicate that some species are beginning to modify their own military doctrines to incorporate human-style hunting techniques. The results have been disturbing." The display showed classified footage from a Draconian Empire's latest military exercises. Massive reptilian soldiers attempted to employ stealth tactics and patience-based warfare with results that could only be described as catastrophic. Their evolutionary psychology was fundamentally incompatible with predatory hunting, and the attempts to force such behavior were causing psychological breakdowns throughout their military hierarchy. "They can't become apex predators," Foster observed. "Their entire evolutionary development selected against predatory behavior." "Exactly," Chen agreed. "But they're trying anyway because they believe it's the only way to remain competitive in a galaxy where humans defined military superiority. The strategic implications were staggering. Humanity had not only achieved military dominance, they had created an arms race where other species were attempting to evolve backward toward predatory behavior in order to compete. General Foster, Interrupted Communications Officer Sandra Kim, were receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council Emergency Assembly. Put it through. The holographic display filled with the image of High Chancellor Vexmora, the current head of the Galactic Council, and one of the few alien leaders who had maintained composure throughout the human integration period. General Foster, the Chancellor began, his crystalline features flickering with stress patterns. We have a situation that requires immediate human intervention. Our long-range sensors have detected an approaching fleet of unknown origin. Their technology appears to be specifically designed to counter conventional galactic military capabilities. Foster exchanged glances with Chun. After 2 years of responding to impossible threats, they had both begun to suspect that something was orchestrating these challenges. Transmission of tactical data commencing now, the Chancellor continued. We estimate arrival of the unknown fleet in 72 hours. All conventional forces have been placed under human command for the duration of this crisis. The data streams began flowing immediately, painting a picture of an approaching threat unlike anything the galaxy had encountered. The unknown fleet consisted of vessels that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, used energy signatures that didn't correspond to any known technology, and moved with coordination that suggested advanced artificial intelligence or collective consciousness. General, Chun said grimly as he reviewed the incoming data, these ships are specifically designed to exploit every known weakness of galactic military doctrine. Energy-dampening fields that neutralize plasma weapons, quantum interference that disrupts advanced sensors, and hull configurations that minimize damage from conventional ordnance. But not designed to counter human tactics? Foster asked. No, Chim replied with growing certainty. These things are built to fight galactic civilization. They're not prepared for biological warfare, environmental manipulation, or evolutionary hunting strategies. Foster felt the familiar chill of recognition. After 2 years of hunting alien apex predators, she had developed an instinct for identifying manufactured threats. This approaching fleet wasn't a natural occurrence. It was a test specifically designed to force the Galactic Council to rely on human capabilities. Colonel Chun, prepare for full deployment of all available human forces, she ordered. But also prepare for the possibility that this is exactly what someone wants us to do. You think this is a setup? I think someone has been studying us just as carefully as we've been studying everyone else, Foster replied grimly. And they've learned that the best way to control galactic civilization is to make them dependent on human hunters. Over the next 60 hours, Foster coordinated the largest deployment of human military forces since the initial expansion into galactic space. 50,000 soldiers, representing the finest hunters from dozens of worlds, were positioned throughout the galaxy's defensive perimeter. The operation required unprecedented cooperation between human and alien forces, with entire galactic fleets placed under the tactical command of human officers. But as Foster reviewed the tactical dispositions, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into an elaborate trap. The approaching fleet was too perfectly designed to counter galactic technology while being vulnerable to human tactics. The timing was too convenient, coming just as galactic civilization had become psychologically dependent on human protection. General, reported Fleet Admiral Zhao from the primary battle line. Enemy fleet has dropped out of hyperspace at predicted coordinates. Initial engagement in 30 minutes. All units, implement Protocol Omega, Foster ordered, activating the most sophisticated battle plan in human military history. Protocol Omega was based on the simple principle that had governed human survival for millions of years. When facing unknown prey, observe first, understand second, and attack only when victory was certain. As the unknown fleet approached, human forces throughout the galaxy began implementing tactics that no other species could comprehend. Instead of meeting the enemy in conventional battle, they faded into the background of galactic space, using asteroids, gas clouds, and gravitational anomalies as camouflage. The approaching fleet immediately demonstrated the effectiveness of their anti-galactic technology. Plasma weapons were neutralized, advanced sensors were jammed, and conventional tactics proved completely ineffective. Within minutes, it became clear that no galactic military force could survive engagement with these vessels. But the unknown fleet had made the same mistake that every other threat had made over the past 2 years. They had assumed that defeating galactic technology meant defeating all possible opposition. All hunter teams, you are clear to engage, Foster transmitted across the battle network. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. 50,000 human soldiers, scattered across dozens of star systems, began implementing the largest coordinated hunt in galactic history. The unknown vessels, designed to fight energy weapons and sensor-guided missiles, found themselves under attack by kinetic projectiles fired from concealed positions among asteroids. Their advanced shields, calibrated to deflect plasma bolts, proved useless against high-velocity metal slugs fired from modified human weapons. But the real revelation came when human boarding teams began infiltrating the enemy vessels. The unknown fleet's crews, whatever they were, had evolved or been designed specifically to fight technological warfare. They were completely unprepared for close-quarters combat against biological predators who used environmental awareness and physical violence as primary weapons. Contact reports from all boarding teams, Admiral Zhao transmitted. Enemy personnel are highly advanced, but completely vulnerable to direct physical engagement. They appear to have no concept of biological warfare. Foster watched the tactical displays as human forces systematically dismantled what should have been an unstoppable invasion fleet. The unknown vessels, despite their technological sophistication, were being defeated by tactics that predated spaceflight by millions of years. But as the last enemy vessel was secured, Foster made a discovery that confirmed her worst suspicions. The captured technology wasn't unknown at all. It was human technology, advanced by centuries of development, and specifically designed to counter every known galactic military capability except human tactics. Colonel Chun, she called urgently, I need immediate analysis of the captured enemy technology. Chen's report confirmed her fears. General, this technology is based on human design principles, but advanced far beyond our current capabilities. Estimated development time suggests a minimum of 3 centuries of concentrated research and development, which means either we're facing time travelers or someone has been studying human technology far longer than we've been part of galactic civilization. There's a third possibility, Chun said grimly. These could be humans from an alternate timeline or parallel development track. The implications were staggering. If humanity existed in multiple variations throughout the galaxy, it meant that the species that had become galactic civilization's apex predators might not be unique. Worse, it suggested that some version of humanity had been manipulating galactic events for centuries, engineering situations that would force the galaxy to become dependent on human protection. General Foster, came High Chancellor Vexmore's transmission. We are detecting massive energy signatures from the capture vessels. Our analysts believe they may be preparing for some kind of final protocol activation. Foster felt the familiar chill of a hunter sensing danger. All units, emergency withdrawal. Maximum distance from captured vessels. The order came just in time. The unknown fleet's vessels began generating energy signatures that exceeded anything in galactic databases. But instead of exploding, they began transmitting data streams directly toward galactic civilization's core worlds. Message traffic analysis complete, reported the Intelligence Division. The transmitted data contains complete records of human military capabilities, tactical doctrines, and psychological profiles. Someone just provided the entire galaxy with a comprehensive guide to human warfare. Foster realized that they had been manipulated on a scale that defied comprehension. The approaching fleet had never been intended to conquer galactic civilization. It had been designed to force humanity to reveal the full extent of their capabilities, while simultaneously providing every galactic power with the intelligence needed to counter human advantages. Colonel Chun, she said quietly, prepare for immediate implementation of Contingency Protocol Alpha. Chen's face went pale. Protocol Alpha was the most classified plan in human military doctrine. The complete withdrawal of human forces from galactic space, and the preparation for potential warfare against the entire galactic community. General, he asked, Are we looking at the possibility of humanity versus the galaxy? Foster studied the tactical displays showing 50,000 human soldiers scattered across dozens of star systems, surrounded by alien civilizations that now possessed detailed intelligence about human capabilities. No, Colonel, she replied grimly. We're looking at the possibility of humanity versus humanity. Someone just started a war between different versions of our own species, and they've made sure that galactic civilization will be caught in the crossfire. As emergency protocols activated throughout human space, Foster began preparing for a conflict that would determine not just the fate of galactic civilization, but the ultimate direction of human evolution itself. The hunt had become something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous prey for an apex predator was another apex predator. And somewhere in the depths of space, the true architects of this conflict were preparing to reveal themselves.